How can the success of an Olympics be measured? If it was purely in terms of profit, then most would have been declared failures. What can't be measured accurately is the intangible, the goodwill, the publicity, the longer-term benefits for not just the host city, but the country.
The winner is Sydney.
Winning the hosting rights means first convincing your taxpayers that it's worth it. A cynic would say that means overstating the projected revenue and understating the costs.
If SOCOG doesn't meet those revenue targets, I've made it clear in my approvals of the SOCOG budget, they have to cut their anticipated expenditure to meet that.
Inevitably, as building begins, costs rise. We've seen that at every Olympics, certainly since 1976 at the Montreal Olympics in Canada. Those games provided a harsh lesson on how not to finance an Olympics, a games held in an incomplete stadium.
I have just said that the stadium will be ready. I have not indicated that it will be complete. In fact, for these last 10 weeks, it has been, I think, clear that it would not be complete. But it will be sufficiently ready for the holding of the Games.
In today's money, the 76 Olympics cost $6 billion, a frightening sum back then. It took Montreal 30 years to pay off the debt, and many of the venues turned into white elephants. 1980's Moscow Games weren't much better, but financial disasters aren't so apparent in totalitarian states. Compounding the problem for the Soviet authorities was their decision to keep the borders shut, which meant about a quarter of the expected 300,000 visitors turned up. 1984 saw a significant turnaround in Los Angeles. As if to showcase the merits of capitalism over the previous communist Olympics, LA made a profit due in large part to cleverly negotiated TV rights.
If you want to sponsor the Olympic team, which means you have the right to use this logo, you must donate at least $500,000. Now, if you want to sponsor the Olympic Games and use this logo, the price tag is a bit higher. You've got to give at least $4 million, and most companies give more than that.
And for a lesson that most subsequent host cities have failed to heed, LA used existing facilities which kept capital costs under control. In comparison, the 88 Games in Seoul, South Korea were expensive, yet a similar commercial approach yielded a decent profit. Barcelona made no excuse that it was spending a lot of money on the 1992 Games, but argued that most would be spent building infrastructure such as roads and apartments. And it appears to have paid off. Quality of life in the city improved, and Barcelona is now one of the most visited cities in Europe. By historical standards, the 96 Olympics in Atlanta were cheap. The city followed LA's successful financial model and it made a profit. But it's argued that the Games were overly commercial, the Olympic spirit giving way to lucrative sponsorship deals. The feel-good factor returned in Sydney, but that came at a cost, close to $9 billion in today's money. However, the real cost may be one of lost opportunities.
Sydney has been criticised for failing to capitalise on the Olympic legacy by attracting business and tourism. There's little evidence that the Games even boosted participation in sport. It took years to work out what to do with many of the Olympic facilities, such as transforming Olympic Park into a commercial and residential hub.
8 years ago, the Olympics returned to its birthplace in Athens. $18 billion was spent on building and improving infrastructure. But it was also the first Games since 9/11, and security was now an extra financial burden. Today, Greece is paying for it dearly. Its profligate spending on the Games racked up a massive debt, contributing to today's wretched social and economic crisis, which will be felt for generations to come. What's more, many Olympic venues are mothballed. China's Games were the most expensive, $42 billion. A booming economy helped fund Beijing's massive building program, and most of the money was spent on much-needed infrastructure. And the Olympics pushed China's door open to the rest of the world, one of those intangible benefits of the Games. While not as expensive as Beijing, London's budget is enormous and still growing at $33 billion. Much of the money is being spent on overcoming the city's underinvestment in sporting facilities and transport.